Hello everybody. So I'm early to another gig. I like doing gigs, right? That's what this is all about. Not necessarily gigs, but performing, right? Um, so I'm downtown, and on the way here, actually, the conversation I want to have with you is a conversation that I had with my wife today. I taught earlier today. I teach lessons on Saturdays. It's a Saturday, and uh, it dawned on, and I'm not saying that it's my students today that made me think of this, okay? I think about stuff all the time. Um, so I'm not saying that my students today had problems or issues that made me think of this. That's not what I'm saying. But I came out of lessons today thinking about talent. And I've never been a real big fan of using that word. And, you know, my wife, after we talked for a while today about it, my wife says that what I'm talking about actually isn't called talent. What we were talking about today, she calls capacity. You have the capacity to do something. And so before I get into the meat of what I'm talking about with the talent, let me tell you why I'm not a big fan of using that word. I have seen way too many times in my life when people were told that they were not talented, and those people became successful musicians, right? I had a dear friend in El Paso. He's passed away since. He was the tuba player for my brass quintet. His name was Jorge Avendaño. Wonderful tuba player. I think he was 1 or 2 years behind me at UTEP. And I remember the day, this is stuck with me so much. I remember the day when we were in sight singing together. I guess that would mean we were actually the same age, because you're in the same class for sight singing. That means you were in the same, year. So the teacher started chewing Jorge out, telling him that he had no business going into music education, that he was not talented, and this had a huge impact. This teacher chewing him out had a huge impact on him. Emotional scars, and he was a wonderful tuba player. If I'm not mistaken, he played with the El Paso Symphony for a while. He played in my quintet. But he was and he was, from what I hear, a wonderful teacher of music. And here's the thing. So I don't remember anyone ever telling me that I was not talented, but there were plenty of times where maybe you could say that it was worse. People telling me stuff that was much worse than just, hey, you're not talented. All throughout my life, people told me that I could not do that which I'm doing today. Right? And so I'll concede that perhaps there is such a thing as talent, right? Musical talent, whatever. What I won't agree with is that you have the ability to discern who has talent and who doesn't. I don't think you are good enough to do that. Now, let's apply some logic to that, right? If you are not good enough to discern who has talent and who does not, then why should I be listening to what you have to say, and why should you be listening to what I have to say? Right? For example, if I ever tell you that you've got no talent and you have no business playing trumpet, what are you going to do about that? What does that mean? I guess that's what I mean. What does it mean if I tell you that? It means zilch, nothing. Oh, and by the way, when this stuff happens, I actually believe, this is going to make me sound weird, when that stuff happens, I believe that it's part of your music career. Okay? I look back at that day with Jorge, and my heart hurts for him. That was wrong for that teacher to say the things he did, and I don't know what was going on with that teacher that day, but he was a real jerk, okay? But guess what? It gets worse, right? That was just school. When you get out into the real world of music, it gets worse, not better. People don't get nicer when you get out of school. They get worse. They get meaner. They get uglier. Okay? And if you can't handle it at school, if you can't, you see what I'm saying? People, and this is a tangent, but people telling you how bad you are is part of what it takes to be a musician. It's part of what it takes to be a great musician. I'll tell you what, think of who your favorite trumpet player is. And I promise you, there's a lot of people that don't like that trumpet player, and they're vocal about it. Okay? Think of who your favorite trumpet player is, someone famous. Or not famous, maybe it's someone local, right? Even someone local. Famous or local or whatever. Whoever you like. Chances are a whole bunch of other people don't like that person. Okay? That's life. That's how it goes. If you can't handle that, you shouldn't be in this business. Okay? And I think it's pathetic, really, when we're told that the way we're supposed to be with that stuff is to, get revenge on those people, right? The ones that say such nasty things, okay? I think it's pathetic, because what that does is it makes you weak, not strong. Getting revenge on somebody else for saying something that to you that hurt your feelings makes you weak. Anyway, that's a tangent. I want to talk about talent today, because I had an epiphany today. Working with hundreds of students over the course of my lifetime. Hundreds of students. I had an epiphany today. I believe, now let's not call it talent. My wife calls it capacity. I believe that at birth, at least 80 to 90% of all people have the capacity to become top-notch, virtuoso trumpet players. All right, that's what I feel. And if we're talking about genetics, intelligence, physical ability, That's what I believe. 80 to 90% of all of the people who are born have the capability, have the potential, whatever you want to call it. I believe, and once again, I'm basing this on my experience as a teacher. I believe what happens from the time they're born until the time they come to my lessons is that something gets wired wrong in their head. And I'm not going to say that it's always like, and by the way, Jorge came out fine in terms of his talent, right? He was an excellent teacher, an excellent player. So obviously that teacher was wrong, right? So if we're talking about talent or capacity or ability, I think what happens along the way. Oh, that's what I was saying. I'm sorry, backtrack. I don't think every time someone has something wired wrong in their head, I don't think every time it's because someone said something horrible. Now, someone saying something horrible can be what screws with your wiring. I'm not saying it's not possible. It is possible. I'm just saying that's not always how it works. Sometimes it's just the way you perceive stuff. I want to say that as a teacher teaching over hundreds of students, over 500 students, most of what's wrong with the students is up in the head. Yes, it may look like a physical problem. It's not physical. It's a physical manifestation of a mental problem. And this is what I was telling my wife today. We were driving to put fuel in the tank of the car so that I could get to my gig today. And I was telling her that the students, to me, they come to me, they all have potential. They all have what I was referring to earlier as talent. She says capacity. They all have this innate ability. Most of them are stopping themselves because of the way they think. That's what's broken down. It's not where are they putting how are they making the aperture, or what are they doing with their tongue. It's none of that stuff. That stuff is the manifestation of what's up here. And I think there's a whole bunch of... I used to have a student whose mother would tell him all the time that he was horrible. You gotta know that does something. You know, and then on the flip side, parents who always tell their children how great they play trumpet, right? That doesn't help necessarily so much either. I think anytime you are untruthful, it has the capacity to hurt your wiring. Or let me reword that. Anytime a parent or a teacher or a friend is untruthful in the way they speak to their daughter, their son, their student, anytime you're untruthful, it has the capacity to do damage up there. And here's what the point I was making with my wife was that some people learn faster than others, right? I believe that the ones who learn faster are the ones that have smaller problems mentally. The ones that make slower progress are the ones that have bigger hurdles to overcome in their head. That's, I know it's anecdotal, but that's based on my decades of experience teaching trumpet. The ones that take longer, it's because the wiring up here is so tangled up that it just takes more time to think their way through the problem. Because their perspective of where they were was so messed up already. The capacity is there. Everything is there. The intelligence, the physique, everything is there. I told my wife, I told her, the reason I say 80 to 90% is to just like account for anomalies, right? Perhaps. I've never seen anybody in my whole teaching career who was quote unquote not talented. Everybody I've taught has had the capacity to do well. And here's the point I made today with my wife, and I know I'm dragging this out, is that sometimes the rewards are so low in comparison to the obstacle that it's not worth it for the student to continue. And those are extreme cases. I'm not saying that's how it is all the time. I can only think of in my entire career 2 students that were in that category. Okay. But yes, sometimes the wiring gets so messed up. The way they approach the instrument is so mentally off that the effort they have to put into straightening that out, ironing it out, untangling everything is so much greater than the reward of being able to play their instrument better. And I'm not saying that I would ever tell those students to quit, because sometimes those students are the ones that end up being the best in the world because they've overcome such tremendous hurdles, right? But we're talking about a scenario where, and the one student I'm thinking of particular, he hung in there for years. And then he just, how could I say it? How can I describe it? It looked like he got burnt out. Effort, and then the rewards that he got were such small increments. And now the good thing, so as a teacher, I have this ability to visualize progress that's made in tiny increments. And I can tell a student, hey, this is the progress you made since last week. And I think that's one of the strengths of my teaching ability, is to make it clear to the students exactly what kind of progress they made over that period of time, right? And I did that with that student, and he did make progress. But the effort he had to invest to make those tiny baby steps was more than he was willing to invest. And at that point, if you're gonna quit, I think it's natural to quit at that point. when you don't quit, that's when something exceptional happens, right? When no matter how bad it gets, and no matter how small the returns are, but after a while you start losing hope. And it wasn't me that was contributing to this lack of hope. It was the person's environment. And that's my point, right? Is that stuff happens, and it even still happens while you're learning now. There's still people now telling you in this very moment that you're horrible. You'll never be able to pull it off. Why are you wasting your time with this? And if that's happening during a time when the wiring in your head is already completely tangled up. Wow. The ones that overcome that, those are some mighty strong people, right? Those are some mighty strong people. So my wife gave me an idea of how she sees talent. She says, let's say you have different jars that represent different areas of your life. Glass jars, right? And throughout your lifetime, your job is to fill these jars with your gifts. She didn't use that word, but I think that's a great way to say it. Fill these jars with your gifts. And maybe one jar is your musical talent, another jar might be your mathematical talent. You see what I mean? And each of us is given a certain capacity to do stuff. And what I told her, the point I was trying to make with her, is that sometimes, imagine using her analogy, right? Sometimes people will come over and dump garbage in your jars. Or sometimes you dump garbage in your jar, right? And now you're going to have trouble filling that with your gifts because there's no room in there. I love that analogy. That's not my analogy, that's her analogy, right? But I love, because it works with what my epiphany was, right? My epiphany today was that there comes a time when the obstacle becomes so tremendous and the rewards for conquering that obstacle are so diminished that it becomes, just in a common sense way, not worth it, right? So using the jar analogy, it's basically what I'm saying, because I was specifically talking about the damage that's done from the time we're born till that time up to now when we're teaching the lesson, the student in the lesson. And that's how I see it. Most of what I'm trying to do in the lesson is trying to get the students to shift the way they're thinking so that it's, what? I can't think of a better word than true. Shift the way that they think so that it's aligned with the truth. That is what happens in my lessons. If I could summarize mentally what's happening in the lesson, that's what's happening. I'm helping the students shift the way they think so that they are more in alignment with what's true. If they think they're horrible, that's not true. If they think they can't do it, that's not true. And each one of those things, oh, I'm horrible. Well, that's some garbage in your jar. Every time you say, I can't do it, you're dumping more garbage in your jar. That's how, I don't know if you want to call it talent, but I do believe, so when I first started this conversation with my wife, I was calling it talent. I do believe that just about all of you watching this video have talent. But something along the way from the day you were born, you know what I used as an example with my wife, I said, there's a lot of people that want their children, when they're toddlers, to listen to Mozart. One of the concepts I have today is that people aren't as clever as they think they are. Nobody is as smart as they think. And it's quite possible that by listening to Mozart as a toddler, you could actually be making things worse, not better. I'm not saying I know that for sure. I'm just speaking generally. A lot of the stuff we do in our cleverness, right, to make things better, are often things that make things worse. It's a fact of life. We think we're doing something to make something better. We actually make it worse. A fact of life. So there's things that parents try to do for their children to help them, you know, foster their talents. And I don't have any exact examples, but I promise you, just in theory, it happens. People do something to make it better, they end up making it worse. And I'm not saying, that said, I'm not saying that the parents shouldn't do this, so don't say I said that, okay? Parents should do what's on their heart to do for their children, all right? And I'm not saying that the children should later blame their parents for them having these issues. No, no, no. That is not right either. That's not what I'm saying. But it happens. What are you going to do about it? Right? Our wiring gets messed up. I just reminded myself, you know, first time I made All Region, I got the paper in the mail that talked about when the rehearsal started for the concert, right? And it said 6:/8:30. And for some reason, I thought that meant 6:30 to 8:30. So when I showed up 15 minutes early, I was 15 minutes late. And my punishment for being 15 minutes late was they put me on last chair. And this is what I mean by your wiring get messed up, right? The way I saw it, it was completely logical, but my logic was flawed. You see what I'm saying? It was completely logical, but the logic was wrong. And you know what? I'm one of those people that think it was right for me to be put last chair. If it wasn't for that, I probably would have forgotten all about that. Wouldn't be telling you about it now. Okay? They put me last chair, and what happened? I never made that mistake again. Right? With my personality, this happens, right? This is a thing. My personality, we tend to get things miswired like that. I have struggled so much in my lifetime, and this is another reason why I don't like people talking about talent. Especially when they think they know who's talented and who's not, because I struggled with a lot of stuff that made sense to me, didn't make sense. It wasn't in alignment with what other people were doing and thinking. And it got me in trouble a lot of times. So, you know, if we don't work through those things, then there's no point in continuing. There's no... Anyway, I hope this is all making sense. You know, if you are one of those who's struggling and people are telling you that you've got no talent, or maybe you think you don't have talent, or maybe you are one of those who have been putting yourself down. Maybe you've been saying that you can't do it, or you'd never be able to make All-State. You know, I'm talking now specifically to high school students. Oh, I'd never be able to make All-State. Stop saying stuff like that. You have the capacity to do that. Now, if you choose not to, maybe you don't. See, remember, the returns can be not enough. Maybe you don't want to make All-State bad enough to invest the effort. Well, that's something different. But to say that I could not possibly ever do that, that's not the same thing. Okay, you have the capacity, the talent, whatever you want to call it, to do that. But every time you do something that crosses your wires, you make it harder. Now let me tell you, what kind of stuff crosses your wires? Let's talk about that. All of the negative emotions will cross your wires. Greed, envy, jealousy, any kind of hatred. Those things will make your wires get crossed. And it'll make it harder for you to get where you want to go. Fear will get your wires crossed and tangled up. You see what kind of stuff I'm talking about? If you have those things, you know, and this goes hand in hand. I've been trying not to refer to videos inside these videos because I have to go now back and put these links, right? But I have that video about, and I can't remember the name of it, but I'll put a link here, and it's about this. It deals with the fear and the negative emotion stuff. And, it's the body tension video. So in a sense, you've already got this lecture already, because we're talking about that body tension. Hey, I better get into the gig. I've got 20 minutes I'm parked in the street, and I gotta go set up. So anyway, if you're struggling with the kind of stuff that I'm talking about now, and body tension would be a symptom that you are struggling with this stuff, then I think it's time to take a step back and start looking for truth in your life. Look at the truth. First of all, stop saying the stuff that you're saying, and stop listening to the people who say that stuff. You know, I remember when I first moved to Chicago, I got a job in Skokie, on that main drive in Skokie at the U-Haul. And I bet $5 that most of you, if you're living in Chicago, you know which U-Haul I'm talking about. And I was so messed up in the head, my wiring was so messed up, that every time something happened, I would say, out of my own lips, "Stupid Eddie." I would say that out of my own lips. "Stupid Eddie, stupid Eddie, stupid Eddie." Every time something happened, I would say, "Stupid Eddie." You gotta stop saying stuff like that. You know what happened is the manager sat me down, because with that branch was going through some rough times at the time. The manager quit, like, out of the blue, and the assistant manager didn't want to have that responsibility. So the guy who was the mechanic ended up running the store, right? And he became the manager. He sat me down and he says, you've got some issues. And he's the one that told me that I needed to stop. To tell you the truth, when he pointed it out, I didn't even realize that I was doing it. I didn't even realize that the words coming out of my mouth were stupid Eddie. I didn't even know that. And he sat me down and he said, stop saying that. You're bringing everybody else down here. And you know, that was, you know, people talk about, I hate this term, coming of age, but that was a coming of age moment for me, right? That was when I grew up. That was the moment that I grew up. Well, when I started growing up. Okay? If you're saying stuff like that about yourself, stop. And if other people are saying stuff like that, it's time to stop listening. Because it's making your trumpet playing harder. And this applies to stuff, I told you this before, a lot of this stuff applies to life outside of trumpet. I don't go there, but I do make sure that I mention that there is a connection to life outside trumpet, all right? So anyway, I better get going. God bless you guys. If you have any questions or comments or whatever, please feel free to discuss it below. I better get going. God bless you. See you later.